Okay, for what we have in this problem, now we have a function f of x. And we have is equal to the quantity of x plus 2 times the square of x plus 1. And we have times the quantity of x minus 1. Now, starting out, now we're looking at the end behavior of the graph of this particular function. And so we have for the leadoff term, okay, so we have okay, with this item, I have a function f of x is equal to x plus 2, quantity times quantity of the square, or to say the quantity of x plus 1 raised to the second. We have times the quantity of x minus 1. And we're looking at the end behavior. Now, in taking what we have now, if we look at the highest degree term, all right, so looking at the factors, okay, so I have x plus 2, higher order term is x. Then for x plus 1 squared, higher degree portion is an x, and that will be to the second. Then we have x minus 1. So looking at what we have now, from the first factor, I have x. From the second, I have x to the second. From x minus 1, I have x. X times x squared, okay, times x. And here we have x times x squared is x cubed times x. So this will be x to the fourth. Okay, so if you notice, for the leading coefficient, okay, you have implicitly that a of n is equal to 1, so that is positive. And we have with the degree n, okay, that is going to be 4, which is even. If you have a positive leading coefficient and the degree of the function is even, now the end behavior, you're going to have up to the left and up to the right. And in looking at what we have here, in choosing the end behavior of the graph, okay, so right is refer to going up, fall means going down. And since we have up at both ends, this means we'll have rises to the left and rises to the right. And now, in terms of the end behavior, again, you have up to the left, up to the right. Now, again, just looking at the factors. Okay, so we have with the zeros. From x plus 2, I have x equal to negative 2. For x plus 1, I have x equal to negative 1. And we have from x minus 1, I have that x is equal to 1. And as for the multiplicity, okay, so x plus 2, you have to the first, x plus 1 is to the second, x minus 1 is to the first. And in terms of whether the graph touches or crosses the x-axis, we have x equal to negative 2, which has a multiplicity of 1. And since 1 is odd, that means you have the graph to cross at x equal to negative 2. Since negative 1 has an even multiplicity with 2, the graph is going to touch at x is equal to negative 1. And with x equal to 1, with a multiplicity of 1, okay, the graph is going to cross at x is equal to 1. All right, so in terms of where the graph is going to cross the x-axis, That's going to be 1 location for touching, 2 locations for crossing. So we have at -2 and 1, where the graph touches but does not cross the x-axis. In this case, that will be at -1. Now, in the case of what we have with the y-intercept of the graph, and just going back, okay, so we have with our function, okay, so for the y-intercept, and again, this will be where x is at 0. So you might have 2 times the square of 1 times -1, 2 times 1, then we have times -1, so that is going to be at -2. So the y-intercept of the graph, and again, y-intercept will be where x is set to 0, so we have at -2. Now, in the case of graphing, it says to graph this function by plotting all the points where the graph of f intersects the x-axis or y-axis. Okay, so we have with our x-axis points, okay, we have at -2. Also, we have, you also have looking at selecting. Okay, so we have in the case of the end behavior, again, you had the end behavior have rising to the left and rising to the right. Now -2 is going to be the leftmost 0, and here at -2, so you have in behavior have rising to the left, but at -2 you have to cross, so you're going from above to below, and then we have an x line. Okay, so you have x equal to -1, and at -1 now it's going to touch the x-axis. So starting below, then you have touching, and you have back down below. And we have now our next x point. Now we have x equal to 1. But before we get to that, we have our y-intercept at y is equal to -2. And then situating our remaining x-intercept. So we have at 1. And again, so this time we have rising to the right. And so we have, so we're looking at, again, crossing, touching, and then once we get over to here, we have crossing from below to above. And so just tying in together what we have now, we have the appearance of this particular graph. So you have all intercepts for the x and the y. So you have cross, touch, then you have the y-intercept, and once we get x equals 1, the graph is going to cross. And so as we check the result, bingo.